I'm the amateur logician. With the help of Sister Miriam Joseph's book, The Trivium, The Liberal Arts of Logic, Grammar, and Rhetoric, we're going to think more about language. We're going to think about how we move from reality to symbols to form language. We're going to think about the predicaments, the logical dimension of language, the psychological dimension of language, and the various facets of that psychological dimension. We're also going to consider the ambiguity of language, and so on. We'll touch the impositions of a word and the intentions of a word. So communication can happen by pure imitation or by symbol. Words, of course, are symbols. And language can either symbolize an essence or an individual or an aggregate. Things exist in the world as individuals. There's you and me. Here's this computer. Over there is a tree. An essence refers to the nature of something. An essence refers to what makes a thing be what it is. You and I belong to the class of men. Our individuality makes us different from each other, though we both have the same essence. There's the common name, namely man in this case, and we can also think about the general or universal description. The general or universal description of man is of being an animal who is rational. We can also use language to symbolize the individual and the aggregate. People have proper names. We identify the person Aristotle. We identify the person René Descartes. And we can identify an aggregate of persons in a city or a nation. And a particular city can be described in various ways. We can have particular or empirical description. In any case, we're grounded in concrete reality. We move from reality to symbols. From Aristotelian scholastic understanding, we don't have innate ideas. We derive our knowledge directly and indirectly from experience. As animals, we make use of our external senses, which include sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. But we also make use of the so-termed internal senses. The common sense is a synthesizing sense. It unifies these external senses to give us a kind of unified, coherent experience. In the synthesizing process, it's also a discriminating process, getting rid of, so to speak, irrelevant noise. So the external senses, so to speak, come together with the help of the common sense, which is a synthesizing sense. This unified, coherent picture is called the precept. So we get from the common sense the precept. And the external senses are used by the common sense. Sense memory, of course, is something even non-rational animals have. There's the original impression, the act of retention, and the act of restoration. Imagination is the power to make an image. It can bring together from the memory different precepts to form new images. Additionally, it can bring forth things from the sense memory. And the estimative sense is really an instinct. It's our instinctive response to stimuli. But what's important here is that from the precept, with the common sense, memory, and imagination, a phantasm is formed. So from the common sense, the memory, the imagination, we get a phantasm. It's something we can picture in our mind's eye without the actual object present in front of us. Abstraction can then occur with the phantasm by what's called the agent intellect to form a concept. And here we reach an essential nature. We reach a concept. And this concept can be attached to a symbol, to a word. I might see many triangles. Here's a triangle, there's a triangle. I see these precepts. I then develop a phantasm, and then, through a process of abstraction, form a concept of triangularity, which is not identical to any specific triangle, any specific image, but which is universal and, in a sense, immaterial thereby. And with language, we categorize. And this is a big topic in Aristotle. We have the so-called predicaments. In a sentence, in a proposition, generally speaking, we have a subject, predicate, relationship. The predicate describes something of the subject. The subject either has that predicate or it doesn't have that predicate. Aristotle lectured about the 10 categories, the 10 predicaments. He thought about general categories of predication. He saw various patterns show up again and again. Now, substance exists in itself. For example, man is a substance, or technically speaking, what is called a secondary substance. Consider the proposition Socrates is a man. The predicate is describing what kind of substance Socrates is. Quantity is related to matter with parts. For example, Socrates has the weight of such and such, whatever that happens to be. Quality is related to form, with formal, non-quantitative characteristics. For example, Socrates is wise. Relation is how a substance or accident, which is a property of a substance, basically, bears to another. For example, Socrates is a mentor of Plato. Action is about a faculty or power. For example, Socrates is lecturing. Passion is being affected. For example, Socrates is seeing a bright light. He's being affected by that light. When, of course, deals with time. For example, Socrates goes to sleep at 10 p.m. Where, of course, is location. For example, Socrates is in Athens. Posture is about relative position of one part to another. For example, Socrates is sitting, and habiliment is about being equipped. For example, Socrates has a pocket with a knife. And in language, when we're forming sentences, we have this subject-predicate relationship. And predicates can be of different kinds. And here are 10 general types of predicates. With that said, let's think about the logical dimension of language. Or we might think of this as the descriptive dimension of language. We're thinking about the content of a word, the definition. Sister Miriam Joseph tells us that legal, scientific, and philosophical essays should focus on this logical dimension for greater clarity. We're dealing with, so to speak, abstract words. We're thinking about things very conceptually in science. And we don't want to mix emotion into the picture, so to speak. We want to be as objective as possible, if you will. But there's also, for sure, a psychological dimension of language. We're thinking about the emotional content of a word. Here we're thinking about rhetorical connotation of a word. Sister Miriam Joseph writes, we're dealing with the related images, nuances, and emotions spontaneously associated with words. Sister Miriam Joseph tells us that this dimension is very important for poetry and other related literature. And here, concrete words are important, unlike a science text, which deals with more abstract words. When you're reading a short story, the good short story in general is not descriptive. It's showing. It's inviting us to use our imagination, to pretend we're at that particular location with the images, the sounds, the smells, and so on and so forth. It's very concrete. And also this implies that when we're dealing with the psychological dimension of language, translation as a rule, is harder. It's harder to translate poetry from one language to another because there's all this psychological nuance attached to these words. And Sister Miriam Joseph breaks this down even further in her book. So, for example, she talks about sound. The sound of a word, how we say it, easily can bring new emotional meaning. She talks about pedantic style. A pompous style in using words in a sentence is often psychologically displeasing. Although occasionally it can be funny, but in general it's just displeasing. We can think about idiom. A combination of words can take on an emotional meaning of its own. For example, take the expression, beat around the bush. Those words only together form a specific content, and there's an emotional meaning behind that. There's illusion. An illusion, so to speak, gives us an indirect reference to something the reader knows about. It provides emotional overtones and associations. Or just think about the general combination of words that often creates an emotional response. Good poetry combines words in just the right way, precisely to evoke such a response. And the logical and poetic understanding refers to how some statements taken literally or purely logically are incoherent or false, but when understood figuratively express a truth, usually a metaphorical or emotional truth. Now, all of this raises the inherent ambiguity of language. Not only is language not fixed nor static, it's alive with a psychological dimension. And clearly, we have community conventions really imposing meaning on signs, on symbols. There's no reason to call a dog, so to speak, a dog. Different languages use different words. That's obviously subjective in that sense. But we agree to, in a community, to these chosen signs, so we can meaningfully talk to each other. Now, Sister Miriam Joseph provides 3 reasons for why language is ambiguous to some extent. So first, just simply because we have various meanings imposed on a word during its history. Second, simply due to the nature of a sign, because we are dealing with signs. Language is a sign, or a system of signs. And here she breaks this down into imposition and intention. So first, imposition. In first imposition, we're really thinking about the meaning of a word. We're thinking specifically about the object signified by the sign, by the word. So we're thinking about the object signified only. So we're thinking about dog as it refers to dog. Zero imposition is only about a word as a sensible sign reflexively. It's only about pronunciation and spelling. So it's sign qua sign only. Then we have second imposition. Unlike first imposition, where we only consider the meaning of the word, second imposition thinks about both meaning and its nature as a sensible sign. We then reflect on the word as a word, not just reflect on the word predicatively as it directs us to an object in the world. So when I think about the word dog as a noun in a sentence, I'm both thinking about what that word refers to in meaning and how it acts as a sign in the given sentence. So here we have grammar. So grammar is the science of second imposition. Grammar is about the relation of words, so to speak, within a sentence, how they function in a sentence. That's why grammar is the science of second imposition. Then we have the 2 intentions of a word, and this deals with meaning as such. So we have first intention. Now I just corrected one error in my description there. But in any case, we're using a word in first intention to refer to what's signified. So we're thinking about dog as it refers to dog, right? And in second intention, we're using a word such as to think about the concept of what is being signified. So this is really where logic starts. So formal logic is a science of second intention. That is, we're dealing with the conceptual order of things. All x is y, all z is x, ergo all z is y. Now, Sister Miriam Joseph tells us that ambiguity arises with second intention, first intention, second imposition, zero imposition, first imposition, because we can use words in ways that it's not clear in what manner we're using them. But also we can be at these intermediate stages in a confusing way, which brings about an ambiguity. Moreover, simply the nature of the phantasm can cause an ambiguity in a certain sense. So consider Sister Miriam Joseph's example with dog. The image formation leading to a concept might be different depending on our experiences with certain breeds. And this may taint our use of the word. And that word, of course, is tied very deeply to our concept of what a dog is. And that concept was formed with the phantasm. Now, I'm the amateur logician giving a preview of some of the content you can find in Sister Miriam Joseph's book, The Trivium, which I highly recommend to buy if you are so interested in this topic. You can also visit my website, amateurlogician.com, where I provide a lot of resources on the Trivium, especially on classical, traditional, verbal style logic. You can sign up to my newsletter if you so desire, and you can follow me on Twitter, also known as X now, and on Instagram. But thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and checking out my website, amateurlogician.com. I'll see you again soon. Be well.